In the vast, windswept plains of the American Midwest, where the land seemed to stretch forever beneath a sky so wide it swallowed a man whole, and where the sun rose each morning with a fiery promise only to sink each evening behind fields of gold, there lived a solitary rancher named Ethan Walker, a man who had given his youth, his strength, and his very soul to the earth beneath his boots, and though his barns stood full and his cattle thrived and his neighbors spoke with respect of his honesty and his tireless labor, his life was marked by an emptiness that no harvest could fill, for he had no wife to greet him at dusk, no children to race across the yard, no laughter to echo against the walls of his weathered farmhouse, only silence thick enough to press against his ribs, and he had long ago packed away his dreams of love and family as though they were relics too fragile to handle, burying them deep beneath the weight of years. Yet as autumn winds swept through the town one year, carrying with them the sharp bite of gossip and scandal, Ethan heard a tale that set his heart burning with a strange urgency, for they whispered of a woman, a bitter soul ground down by poverty, who had sold her own daughter, a young woman heavy with child, to strangers as though she were no more than livestock, and people spoke of it in hushed tones over whiskey in the saloon, shaking their heads in pity or disgust. But to Ethan it was not just a scandalous tale, it was a call, a cry from fate itself, and though he could not have explained why, he saddled his horse and rode into town, his jaw tight, his chest heavy with something he could not name, and there, in a dim and dusty room that smelled of despair, he found her, Anna, a girl little more than 20, standing with her head bowed, her hair falling like a veil across her pale face, her hands folded protectively over the gentle curve of her belly, her dress threadbare, her shoes worn, and when she raised her eyes, Ethan saw not a fallen woman nor a burden, but a soul abandoned in her most vulnerable hour, a flicker of dignity still alive in her gaze though the world had done its best to crush it, and without haggling, without hesitation, he stepped forward, declaring that he would take her, not as a man buying chattel but as a human being refusing to let another soul be discarded, and so it was that Anna rode with him out of town, the wagon wheels groaning over dirt roads, the silence between them heavy but not cold. And when at last the ranch came into view, sprawling pastures dotted with cattle, the barns standing against the horizon like a sentinel, the farmhouse weathered but sturdy, Anna's lips parted in awe, for though humble, it promised something she had not known in years. Safety, and Ethan, suddenly self-conscious of the plainness of his home, hurried to prepare a room for her, dusting furniture, laying fresh linens, setting water by the bed, small gestures that to Anna felt grand, for she had been given little more than indifference by those meant to love her, and in the days that followed, a rhythm took root, tentative but steady, Ethan rising before dawn as always to tend the herds yet leaving food on the table for her, fixing the old rocking chair so she could sit by the fire, speaking gently though he was a man of few words, and Anna watching with cautious eyes, her heart bruised by betrayal, until she began to see that his kindness demanded nothing in return, and one evening, as she sat humming by the fire, her hands resting upon her belly, the child within her kicked for the first time, and she gasped softly, calling Ethan over, taking his rough hand and pressing it against her stomach, and in that instant, the hardened rancher froze, his breath caught, his eyes widening as he felt that flutter of life, so delicate yet fierce, and tears welled unbidden, rolling down cheeks that had long been dry, and Anna saw them, and something within her shifted, for she knew then that this man, though not the child's father, carried in him a heart wide enough to love them both, and from that moment the bond between them, invisible but unbreakable, began to grow, and as weeks turned to months, trust blossomed between them, slow and steady like spring grass after rain, Ethan showing her how to feed chickens, how to knead bread with flour milled from his own fields, Anna bringing warmth into the farmhouse, her quiet humming filling rooms that had echoed only with silence, and though neither spoke of it, affection grew in the spaces between chores and meals, in the way Ethan left flowers on the table without comment, in the way Anna mended his shirts with care, and when winter came, bringing with it biting winds and snow that buried fence posts, they faced it together, Ethan chopping extra firewood, Anna keeping broth simmering, the baby growing stronger each day, and when at last her time arrived, on a still night when the stars blazed like lanterns hung in the heavens, Ethan paced the floors, fear gnawing at his gut, until at last the cry of new life broke through the night, a sound so pure it seemed to shake the rafters, and when he entered the room, Anna, exhausted but glowing, cradled a tiny boy in her arms, and she looked up, whispering, "Would you like to hold him?" And Ethan, with trembling hands, gathered the child to his chest, feeling the fragile heartbeat against him, and tears streamed freely down his face as he whispered the name Samuel, after his father, vowing silently that this boy would never know abandonment, only love. And from that day forward, the ranch was transformed, no longer a place of silence but of laughter, of cries and lullabies, of hope reborn, Ethan rising not only for cattle but to cradle Samuel in the early hours, to bring Anna water and meals, to marvel at the way she sang her son to sleep, and Anna, once broken by betrayal, blossomed with strength, her love for her child twined inseparably with a growing love for the man who had rescued her, respected her, and given her a home. And though neighbors whispered about the unusual beginning of their family, though some scoffed that a man should take in another's child, Ethan paid them no mind, for each time he saw Samuel's tiny hand curl around his finger, each time he saw Anna's smile light the farmhouse, he knew the truth of what they had built. And as years passed, their companionship deepened, steady and sure, until one spring morning, as apple blossoms scattered across the yard, Ethan asked her to be his wife, not with grand words but with a simple ring he had saved for years, and Anna, tears glistening, said yes, not because she felt indebted, but because she had come to love him with a depth that surprised her. And their wedding, though small, was filled with laughter, neighbors softening as they saw the joy in their eyes. And from that day, they faced every hardship as one, droughts that cracked the earth, storms that tore roofs from barns, sickness that laid Ethan low, all weathered with resilience and devotion. And Samuel grew, toddling after calves, then running through fields, his laughter like bells, Ethan teaching him to ride, to mend fences, to respect the land, Anna teaching him kindness, patience, and faith. And in the evenings, as the sun bled into the horizon, the three of them sat on the porch, the day's labors behind them, the prairie stretching endless before, and Ethan, once the loneliest man on the plains, felt a peace so profound it brought tears even then, knowing that he had been given not just a wife and child, but the miracle he had waited for all his life, a family forged not by blood but by love. And as Samuel grew older, challenges came. Schooling in town where other children mocked him for not sharing Ethan's blood, whispers from cruel tongues that cut deep. But each time he returned home, Anna's embrace and Ethan's steady hand reminded him where he belonged. And one night, when Samuel, now 10, asked tearfully if Ethan was truly his father, Ethan pulled him close, his voice steady as he said, "Blood doesn't make a father, son, love does, and by that measure, you are mine as much as the breath in my lungs." And Samuel believed him, carrying that truth in his heart forever. And as years rolled on, Ethan and Anna watched their son grow into a strong young man, their love deepening with each passing season. And though hardships never ceased, floods, failed crops, accidents with cattle, they endured, for the miracle that had begun in despair had blossomed into a life rich with meaning. And Ethan, once only a lonely rancher, became the pillar of a family whose laughter and love filled every corner of the farmhouse, proving that miracles do not always arrive in lightning and thunder, but in the quiet knock of fate at the door, in the courage to open one's heart, and in the choice to love even when the world has given every reason not to. And as seasons kept circling like the hands of a great clock, Samuel grew taller, his voice shifting from the high laughter of a boy to the steady tone of a young man. And Ethan, though the lines on his face deepened and his shoulders bore the weight of age, felt younger inside each time he watched the boy ride across the pastures, hair flying, eyes bright, the image of vitality and promise. And Anna, whose spirit had once been crushed, now stood proud, her hands often busy with work yet her heart lighter than she ever imagined possible. And the ranch itself seemed to mirror their transformation, the fields yielding more, the cattle healthier, the very air warmer, for a home filled with love has a way of radiating life into the soil itself. Yet life, as it always does, brought trials to test their strength. For 1 year, a drought swept across the plains, the earth cracking open, grass withering beneath relentless sun, cattle growing lean, and Ethan rose before dawn each day to haul water from distant wells, his body aching but his resolve firm, while Anna stitched and mended until her fingers bled, finding ways to stretch what little they had so Samuel would never go hungry. And Samuel, only 14, worked beside his father as though he were a man, his palms blistered from ropes and tools, yet never complaining, for he knew this land was more than dirt and grass, it was the bond that tied them together. And when at last rain came, pouring down like mercy from heaven, they stood in it together, laughing, crying, faces lifted to the sky. and Anna whispered that perhaps God himself had not forgotten them, and Ethan, holding both wife and son close, felt certain she was right. But hardship did not end with drought, for whispers in town often lingered, cruel voices reminding Samuel he was not Ethan's by blood, and though Ethan told him again and again that love was thicker than any bloodline, Samuel carried those wounds quietly, until one day, older boys cornered him after school, jeering, calling him unwanted, and Samuel, his fists clenched, fought them off. But he returned home with torn clothes and eyes brimming with shame, asking Ethan if it was true that he was not truly his, and Ethan, heart aching, knelt before him and said, "Son, blood may tell a man where he began, but it does not tell him who he belongs to. Look at this land, look at your mother, look at me, every post in that fence, every scar on my hands, every smile on your mother's face, they all belong to you as much as they belong to me, because we chose each other, and that choice is stronger than anything else." And Samuel, wiping his eyes, threw his arms around his father, holding him tight, and from that day forward, he no longer questioned his place, for he knew it was secure. And as years passed, Ethan and Anna's love only grew, not in fiery declarations but in steady devotion, in the way they worked side by side, in the way Ethan warmed her tea each winter morning, in the way Anna pressed his hand under the table during hard times, in the way their eyes found each other across a crowded church. And Samuel blossomed into a man of integrity, his shoulders broad, his heart kind, carrying in him the lessons of both his parents, and the ranch thrived, not without struggle but with resilience, until one terrible storm arrived, a tornado that ripped across the plains, tearing down fences, tossing cattle, splintering barns, the sky black and roaring like judgment itself, and Ethan, though older now, fought to save his herd, while Anna clutched Samuel, praying in the cellar. And when at last the storm passed, leaving behind ruin, Ethan stood amidst the wreckage, his hat lost, his face cut, but his spirit unbroken, and together, family and neighbors rebuilt, plank by plank, nail by nail, proving again that no force of nature could break what love had built. And in the years that followed, Samuel found love of his own, a kind and strong woman from town who saw in him the same steady light that had once drawn Anna to Ethan, and their wedding was held under the same wide sky. Ethan standing proud as best man, Anna wiping tears as her son, once an abandoned babe, pledged his life to another, and soon grandchildren's laughter rang across the ranch, tiny feet pounding the porch, voices shouting in play, and Ethan, gray-haired and slower, sat with Anna rocking on the porch, watching the next generation fill the land with life. And one evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange, Samuel came to his father, kneeling beside him, and said, "Pa, I want you to know, everything I am, everything I've become, is because of you, because you chose me." And Ethan, tears shimmering, placed a hand on his son's shoulder and whispered, "No, son, it was you who saved me, you and your mother, you gave me the family I thought I'd never have, the miracle I prayed for in silence." And Anna, sitting close, pressed her hand into his, and in that moment, as grandchildren played in the yard, as cattle lowed in the fields, as the ranch stood sturdy against the horizon, Ethan knew his life had come full circle, the barren years of loneliness transformed into decades rich with love. And though time would one day claim him, though the land would pass into Samuel's hands, his heart was at peace, for he had lived to see the miracle he had waited for, lived to hold it in his arms, to walk beside it through hardship and joy, and to sit in its light as evening fell, proving once and for all that even the loneliest rancher can be saved by love, that family is not only born but chosen, and that sometimes the greatest miracles come not with thunder but with a quiet knock on the door, a frightened girl abandoned by the world, a child yet unborn, and the courage of one man to open his heart. And so his story, though simple, became legend in the whispers of town, not of scandal but of redemption, not of loneliness but of abundance. And the ranch itself, standing tall through storms and droughts, became a living testament that love can heal what life has broken, and that the miracle one waits for may arrive only when one least expects it, transforming emptiness into eternity.